Hi, this is Starkey Sowers. Welcome again to another Plus Program training series. So I want to thank you guys that have been with us for so many years. We've actually been doing these particular series for 4 years, and today's actually going to bring us in on the last part and the last time that we're actually going to be presenting these to you. So if this is something that you actually have liked, you might want to contact marketing department at Clark's Nutrition and tell them that you want more of these series. All right, so with that said, we're going to look at today's last topic, and it's going to be macronutrients, fats, and this is part 1. So right out of the bat, when we look at macronutrients, we have to think of a couple different things. First of all, there's 3 different types of macronutrients. There's proteins, there's fats, and there's carbohydrates. Today's focus is definitely going to be on fats. We looked at proteins and we looked at carbohydrates previously, so I kind of feel like we covered those pretty decently. The other thing to remember too, there is what we call micronutrients. Those micronutrients are vitamins and minerals, and we covered those as well in some other series. So a couple unique things about fats. Number one, when we think about fats, there's all these different types of things. A couple things that are characteristic. First of all, fats are essential. Our bodies actually need them. The other thing to remember about fats is this, is they are structurally and chemically somewhat similar to proteins as well as carbohydrates. So what does that mean? So it means that they have carbons, hydrogens, and oxygens, nitrogens only being with proteins. So chemically, they've got the same type of compounds, but the arrangements are completely different. So it makes them a little bit characteristically different. So the other thing to remember about them as well is they are not what we call water soluble. They're actually kind of greasy when we actually touch them. So if you spill them on the countertop and you're trying to clean the countertop and put water on it, it just seems to make it worse. We've got to use something like soap to kind of clean up the mess and get it off the countertop. So being greasy, one of the things that they do is actually repel water. So they're not water soluble. A great illustration in that, for instance, if we look at Italian dressing kind of separates out. You've got the vinegar, the water, as well as the oil separating out. And the oil specifically is not water soluble, so it repels it or moves away from it. So kind of a neat little characteristic. A lot of times maybe you're washing something or you think, wow, that's a fat because of the greasy compound. Maybe give you a little bit of a heads up. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at a couple unique things. First of all, a lot of things people think are fats good for me? Are they bad for me? Do I need them? As we were saying, they're absolutely essential. Without them, we actually can't function. Our bodies have to have them on a regular basis in order to be able to function. A couple different things when we look at it. Number one, we see that fats are necessary for energy production. All right, so in order to have energy, our bodies need fats in order to pull that off. The other thing we want to look at is they're about double the amount of calories. So roughly about 9 calories per gram as opposed to 4 calories per gram for proteins as well as carbohydrates. The other thing that we have to remember too is their structural components. So when we say structural components, a couple unique areas that we actually see it. Number one is going to be in the skin. Actually, proteins and fats is what makes the skin components up. The other thing that we see when it comes to nerves, fats are actually components of nerves as well as all the spinal column and everything of that nature. Fats are integral to that area. The other thing is every single cell structure has fats in them, so it just makes it an essential component. The other thing is body fat. So when we think of body fat, we think of like the sculpture or the contour of our physique, so to speak. We have to have fats in order to make that present, so to speak. So we see a lot of cool things with that. One of the things that we have to remember too when it comes to fats and body fat is a lot of times people have a tendency to want to get rid of the body fat. It's not necessarily what we want to do. We definitely need a certain amount of body fat in order for the body to function and to look decent. All right, so one of the other things that I want to do is I want to look at the family of fats. We have a tendency to hear all this verbiage and all this different types of communication when it comes to fats. So what I want to do is kind of like maybe bring out some families or some ideas of this. And so number one, when we think of fats, a lot of you might have heard of the difference between like fatty acids. Well, there's different types of fatty acids. First of all, there's saturated and there's unsaturated fats. And in that world of saturated and unsaturated fats, we typically would say that the saturated are the bad and the unsaturated are the good. Well, actually, it's a balance between those fats that becomes so critical. Triglycerides is another topic we oftentimes hear, and we're going to see it in a couple of different places. When it comes to food fats, such as olive oil or oils and things of that nature, those are typically in nature triglycerides. Fats like to hibernate 3 at a time with some glycerol, and they call those triglycerides as food fat components. The other thing that we see is phospholipids. Phospholipids are actually what we call lecithin type compounds. Lecithin is kind of a unique substance. We see it actually in every single cell in the whole body. The other thing we see with lecithin, we actually see it used in food type situations. So when we see lecithin used in food, it actually becomes an emulsifying agent. Great illustration, we were talking about that Italian dressing where you've got oil and vinegar kind of separated out. You add an emulsificant to it, such as lecithin, and it kind of blends the two of them together, giving you a nice little homogeneous mixture. All right, so fatty acids, triglycerides, phospholipids, as well as cholesterol. Cholesterol a lot of times is found in certain different types of components or different types of foods. Ultimately, body uses cholesterols in a lot of different ways, and we'll kind of look at that at the next subject. The next subject is blood fats. Once again, so if you go to the doctor, he's probably going to talk to you about a couple different things. Number one, triglycerides. Well, triglycerides, as we were saying, are literally those food component fats. Well, then when we look in the bloodstream, those are the things that are being carried around the body by cholesterols. Cholesterols are the carriers of these fats, and they kind of deposit them for energy and things of that nature throughout all the different cells. And so ultimately, your doctor is going to want to talk to you about how much triglycerides you got or how much blood fat you've got, as well as the ratio, so to speak, of the good and the bad cholesterol. The final category is waxes. And so when we look at waxes, it kind of takes two fats and it kind of shoves them together. And that's like a wax candle and things of that nature. So a lot of times you'll hear the term fats or lipids used interchangeably. And this kind of gives you a little foundation on where they're at, how they're described, so to speak, give you a little bit of nomenclature to have some understanding. All right, thanks again for watching another Plus Program training series. You definitely want to look at part 2 of this series because we're going to definitely develop some more concepts about fats.